this past Saturday or Friday, actually, not Saturday. Pistons got themselves a win on the road against the Toronto Raptors and clinched the playoffs for the first time since I believe it was 2018. I think it was 2017, 2018. I could be wrong. Could have been 2018, 2019. So it would have been, I was in high school when they just clawed their way back into the playoffs. The Pistons have finally done it after, half a decade or so of utter ineptitude, a little over half a decade of just utter ineptitude after that playoff run where Blake Griffin dragged the corpse of that team. The Pistons finally get back, and it's not just that they're getting back. It is, in a sense, frankly, it's how they're getting back. They're getting back on the backs of Cade Cunningham and on the backs of Jalen Duren and some of these other young players coming up and making big impacts. And then, obviously, the pro moves. It goes without saying. Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, even Tobias Harris. All three of those guys have been impact players for you and have helped push this team from a good team or from a okay team to a good team. And while they've lost 4 out of their last 5, which is not great. You're not going to hear any excuses from me. They've lost 4 out of their last 5. They've only got 3 games left here down the stretch. They got a couple of games against Milwaukee and then a game at home against New York as well. One of the games against Milwaukee also at home. One of the games against Milwaukee is going to be an NBA TV team or TV game as well, by the way. So if you have NBA TV, you can go ahead and flip the Pistons game on. Anyway, the struggling down the stretch, maybe you want to say it's like, I don't know. Think of last year when the Tigers clinched the playoffs in the final series of the year, and then they end up losing a 2 out of 3 game set to the worst team in Major League Baseball ever, in the White Sox. I'm not saying that that's an excuse. However, how much of an influence is your seeding really going to have? And look, there is going to be some difference. Like, I think the fact is, at the very least, I think they're locked in at either a 5 or a 6. Okay. So can I pull up the playoff standings? Or maybe, I don't know if this will show the standings, if this will show the playoffs versus division. No. Okay. Yeah, whatever. We'll just forget it. Either way, they're not going to make the 4 seed. I don't think that's even mathematically possible. They are 3.5 games behind. Yeah, 3.5 games behind, and they got 3 games left. So mathematically, not possible. Anyhow, the question then becomes, you're pretty much stuck in between either playing Indiana, if you get it to the 5 seed, or you're going to play New York. Here's the thing. You play New York, and then you play Milwaukee twice. So, assuming you go 500 down that stretch, you win 2 out of 3. Or, heck, you win 3 out of the 3. You win 3 out of 3, you're going to be in that 5 spot because you're going to take down Milwaukee, who's only a game and a half ahead of you. With Indiana, or with New York, basically if you just lose out, you're stuck at that spot. But the question I have is, which team do you really even want? Because to me, I think either team, the Pistons could win the series. I think that they're good enough. I think they are coached well enough. I think they could. I also could very well see them losing because some of the injuries are concerning. They haven't been playing well down the stretch. And Indiana, in particular, has had their number pretty much all year. And I was just thinking, what would be more just delectable? What would be more enjoyable? Would it be the Pistons destroying the Indiana Pacers championship dreams for yet another season? Like, we go on this massive drought of postseason lack of success. Indiana similarly goes through that thing. They kind of rise up. Tyrese Halliburton, they feel like they're on the up and coming, and then all of a sudden objects in mirror are closer than they appear, and the Detroit Pistons are coming right as they are reeling and right as they are like, no, this is our time, and just ruin their playoff hopes like we seem to always do. At least in the early 2000s with Reggie Miller and O'Neal and obviously Ron Artest and all them. Seemed like it was just like, oh, everything's great for the Pacers. Michael Jordan's gone and the Pistons are back. And maybe that's just what it is. When the Pacers get good, the Pistons simultaneously get good so that they can take down the Pacers in the playoffs. People don't think about this. But that's the kind of analysis you'll hear on this show. That's for sure. On the other end of it, you have the New York Knicks. Now, the Knicks are the 3 seed, and they're very good. Jalen Brunson's a very good player. I believe he's coming off of injury. But regardless, the Knicks are, very good. They've won 7 out of their last 10. So they're not exactly cooling off. However, the Pistons against the Knicks this year, if I can just pull up those games. Whoopsie daisical. It's because I got to search New York. There we go. The last time they lost to the Knicks, I believe, yes, the last time they lost to the Knicks was in early November when the Pistons were on a 1-5 start to the season. So things were not off to a good start. They start the season, they lose 4 straight, then they finally get a win against Philadelphia on the road. They lose to New York at home by 30 points. I think that loss, in a sense, kind of was a little bit of a turning point for the Pistons. If you look at just the games they started winning, they got a couple of wins in a row against Brooklyn and against LA, the Lakers in that case. Then they just randomly lose to the Hornets. I can't explain that. They start kind of losing on and off. They're close to 500. They're not quite 500. Things are kind of losing out of control. Then they play the Knicks in December. And they win. And then they're 10-15. And you're like, okay, that was unexpected. They lose to the Celtics, whatever. They beat Miami in overtime. And that was the moment, specifically, when things really started to go well for the Pistons this year. They start rattling off wins. They get 3 in a row. Then they lose. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. Then a loss. Then 2 in a row. Then a couple of losses in a row. Then 2 losses to make it up. Then 3 in a row losses. Either way. And then you get into February and the Pistons just absolutely go off and win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row. At that point, they're securely over 500. Or they're definitely over 500. And I think basically since February and maybe even late March, into March, they've been, a much different team. They've been a very, very good team. New York, on the other hand, we haven't played them in a while. Okay. But for some reason, in my mind, it's like, what would I rather want? Would I rather want the Pacers, who, whatever, we have a historic rivalry with them, or would I force those awful networks, ESPN or TNT? I guess TNT is not as bad, but ESPN especially, would I force them to put on the Pistons? And then could you imagine watching as the Knicks just collapse in the first round to a team that won 14 games prior? Oh, there's a part of me. There's a part of me, a sick and twisted part of me. Now, I don't want to lose any game. I would love it if they just won 3 in a row to end the season. That'd be great. However, there is this sick, twisted part of me that just has this not masochist, this sadistic desire to just, okay, let's just match up with the Knicks. And let's just ruin New York sports' day. Because one thing for sure that will always seem to deliver is the New York Knicks losing in the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, that is. But them losing in the playoffs, it just never gets old. And it's funny because I actually like Jalen Brunson, and this Knicks team is not as unlikable as, most other New York teams. But something about like them being the 3 seed, I'm just like, ooh, I just kind of want to, I just kind of want to like ruin their weekend. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a mean person, but that's that. Now, what I wanted to do before we end this segment as well, I want to just put into perspective just how impressive what the Pistons have done is. So I pulled up some of the worst seasons in NBA history. Now, some of these teams were much worse than the Pistons, didn't win double-digit games. Like we're talking the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats. Granted, they didn't play as many games, but that team was bad, needless to say. And I pulled up just a few teams that were kind of comparable to the Pistons, and then I looked up how those teams did the following season. So the first one that I put down was the 97 Vancouver Grizzlies. They finished with the same win percentage as the Pistons did last year. The following year, they somehow managed to get worse. Don't even know how that's possible. The 83 Rockets were another team that I pointed out. I believe this was the Rockets team that went on to draft Hakeem Olajuwon. I could be wrong. I'm not totally sure. The Rockets finished with the same winning percentage as the Pistons. The following year, they won less than 30 games. And before you say, oh, well, those are all older teams, okay, fine. The 2010 Timberwolves won 15 games. So they won one more game than the Pistons did last year. And the following year, they would go on to just win 17. So all of this is just to say, regardless of, win a playoff series, lose a playoff series, whatever, go to the Eastern Conference Finals or no. I doubt that's going to happen. The fact that the Pistons are where they are, there are only so many teams. If there are really any teams, I didn't, go down every single team. Most of the time when a team has a franchise worst record, they don't just come out next year and make the playoffs with games to spare. What the Pistons have done this year is special. And the fact that the media, especially the national media, now granted, the fact that Money Pistons games were not on national TV was probably as related to the fact that they won 14 games last year. But either way, the fact that this is not as much of a story, not necessarily day to day, but just, a couple of segments about, hey, this Pistons team is doing something that is absolutely unthinkable. I mean, like the idea that you win 14 games one year and make the playoffs the next year, it's unfathomable. So I think it should be shouted out a little bit more. Either way, I'm happy that playoff basketball is back in Detroit. Now let's go out and win some playoff games. Hi, it's me again. If you enjoyed what you just saw, hit the like and subscribe button. We do live shows every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there.